Russia and China oppose a decision by the United Nations Human Rights Council against Syria and reiterate rejection of foreign interference in Syria's affairs. The Foreign and Expatriates Ministry affirms that Amos has requested to come to Syria at an inconvenient time. The Syrian TV camera reveals some of the devastation caused by armed terrorist groups in Baba Amr neighborhood. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to News in English live from Damascus. Russia and China have opposed a resolution by the United Nations Human Rights Council against Syria. Cuba also opposed, as Ecuador, India, and the Philippines abstained. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Chinese counterpart Yang Jiechi reiterated their rejection of any encouragement to the conflict in Syria by foreign sides. The Russian Foreign Ministry said in a statement that Lavrov and Jiechi discussed in a phone call the situation in Syria and stressed their country's unified stances against any direct or indirect encouragement of violence in Syria. The statement added that Moscow and Beijing call on all foreign parties to create favorable conditions for starting a comprehensive internal dialogue. Both ministers expressed readiness to continue close contacts on the Syrian issue and coordinating their countries' stances at the United Nations and other international organizations. They voiced their satisfaction over the results of the referendum on the new Syrian constitution, which gained the support of the majority of the Syrian people, stressing the necessity of an accurate implementation of the reform program, including parliamentary elections. Chinese President Hu Jintao has affirmed keenness on developing relations with Syria in all the economic and development fields in order to enhance the Syrian-Chinese relations. On the current political crisis in Syria, the Chinese president voiced his country's belief that a solution for the crisis would be through a halt of violence by all parties and a comprehensive political dialogue with the participation of all the Syrian people's factions. The Chinese president expressed satisfaction over the depth of the Syrian-Chinese relations, which date back to more than 50 years, and gratitude for Syria's support for China regarding all the latter's basic issues, particularly the issue of Taiwan and Tibet. This was voiced by the Chinese president during his reception of Dr. Ahmad Mustafa, who handed him his credentials as Syria's ambassador to China. Ambassador Mustafa expressed the Syrian people's gratitude for China's stance in support of Syria, saying that history will prove the correctness of the Chinese stand towards events in Syria. The spokesman of the Foreign and Expatriates Ministry has announced that the ministry has unfortunately learned of the allegations that occurred in the press statement issued by Valerie Amos, the United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, in which she claimed that Syria has rejected to receive her or cooperate with her in her mission. The ministry, the spokesman added in a statement today, wishes to clarify in this respect that it had welcomed Amos's visit to Damascus and expressed readiness to cooperate with her, provided that an agreement on the appropriate date of the visit would be reached between the two sides. He said the ministry was surprised, however, over her arrival in the region and her request to come to Syria at a time which was not convenient for us. In order to straighten things out, the spokesman added, the Syrian side is ready to continue consultations with Amos on a date for her visit to Damascus that would be convenient to both sides. The American foreign policy website, foreignpolicy.com, has revealed that sources at the so-called Syrian opposition have said that Saudi Arabia is currently sending weapons to the opposition through allies in Lebanon and Iraq. An article by former intelligence analyst at the American Treasury Department, Deputy Chairman of the Defense of Democracies for Research Affairs establishment, Jonathan Schanzer, pointed out that in light of recent developments, it was certain that more weapons were being on their way to Syria from Saudi Arabia. Schanzer referred to the the Saudi Foreign Minister Saud al-Faisal's withdrawal from the so-called Friends of Syria conference held in Tunisia last week. The Saudi Foreign Minister said that humanitarian aid to Syria was not enough and that arming the Syrian rebels was an excellent idea. Chancellor added that soon afterward an unnamed official commented in the Saudi news agency that Riyadh sought to provide the Syrian opposition with whatever it needed. Meanwhile, Chancellor added that Saudi clerics are now openly calling for jihad in Syria and scorning those who wait for Western intervention. Chancellor went on to say that other Gulf countries, particularly Qatar, might also dispatch arms to Syria, as the Qatari Prime Minister Hamad bin Jassim had declared that all the necessary assistance should be offered to the Syrian opposition, including weapons. Syrian TV camera toured areas in Baba Amru and recorded the huge devastation caused by the armed terrorist groups who committed horrific crimes against civilians there. The nurse Muhammad Rashid Assaf was killed as an armed terrorist group stormed into the workers' hospital in Homs Governorate and opened fire inside. Meanwhile, an armed terrorist group attacked a water plant in Al-Qasir in Homs countryside, causing water supply to stop. In Idlib Governorate, an armed terrorist group robbed the Directorate of Technical Services in the city and stole the salaries of employees whose value exceeded 2 million Syrian pounds. Meanwhile, customs personnel in Idlib clashed with an armed terrorist group and seized 18 pump-action guns and 44 rifle pieces on the borderline with Turkey. And this brings our bulletin to a close. For more news, log on to our website in English, syriaonline.sy. I'll leave you now with Rirado and the economy news.
Good afternoon. Minister of Irrigation, Dr. George Tommy, stressed the strategic and economic importance of the dragging water project from Dijla River to villages and towns of Al-Hasaka city, as it provides thousands of jobs for people there and increase the production of the strategic crops for the irrigated agricultural areas through reviving and investing about 64,000 hectares from the agricultural lands. Dr. Tommy reviewed the work carried out and under implementation the outlet water of the pumping station of the Ain Diwar appointed to the project. The minister also stressed that the water storage reality for dams in Al-Hasaka province is good in general. He pointed out that there is a study concerning the rainfall and abundance in order to know the reasons behind the non-arrival of the rainwater to some dams. The Minister of Agriculture, in cooperation with the UNDP, FAO and UNIDO, launched the project of integrated development of Al-Ghab region. The project, whose cost is estimated at $540 million, aims at making the economy of the region balanced socially and environmentally through adopting the mechanisms of market economy. The project depends on enhancing the human and natural resources of the region and creating an appropriate infrastructure. The new strategy for developing Al-Ghab region recommended the establishment of an executive and supervising committee as an urgent measure to put down immediate work plans until a new committee is formed during the next 2 years. Governor of the Central Bank of Syria, Adib Mayale, said that the bank has taken a number of measures to avoid the negative repercussions of the European new economic sanctions, adding that the sanctions didn't affect the bank assets of foreign currencies and reserves. The European Union has taken new economic sanctions against the Central Bank of Syria, including the freeze of its assets at the EU countries, preventing it from selling, buying gold, valuable minerals or diamond. The sanctions come within a series of sanctions sanctions previously imposed on the Syrian people, which affect their living. Imposing such sanctions on the Central Bank of Syria aims at paralyzing its transactions, which means an economic siege on the Syrian citizen, Mayales said in a statement to Sana Wednesday. On the rise of exchange price in the parallel market, Mayales said that the reason behind this increase is that some dealers exploited the new sanctions on the Central Bank of Syria to arouse fear among the citizens and achieve illegal profits. Director General of the Public Establishment of Syrian Railways, George Makapari, said that the establishment signed the minutes of the meeting with Iraqi Railways Company recently held in Baghdad to connect the railways between Al-Qa'im in Iraq and Abu Kamal in Syria, in translation of the meeting minutes signed in Damascus in early February. Makapari noted that the Public Establishment of Syrian Railways and the Iraqi Railways Company also signed a draft agreement on rail transport of passengers and goods between Iraq and Syria. The Brent crude futures stabilized over $122 a barrel, deriving support from larger than expected growth of the U.S. economy. Also positive data for the factory sector in China. Amid fears of stopping supplies from the Middle East, the Brent was down earlier this week amid profit-taking processes after recording its highest levels in 10 months. Still, many market participants expect further drop. The European shares fell today as investors accommodate pumping cash in the banking system while the economic growth varies. The Nikkei index is closing down after failing to stand at 9,800 points. The local investors selling to reap profits contributed the decline after the index rose over 10% last month and recorded its best performance in 2 decades. That gold rose today by 1.5%. Investors hope for a new launch by the Federal Reserve for a quantitative easing, which may pump the cheap loans into the markets. Most major currencies are trading quietly in the Asian session on Thursday as investors stayed on the sidelines amidst mixed Asian stocks. The US dollar slid 0.2% to 1.3347 US dollars per euro in Tokyo from the close in New York yesterday. The US currency lost 0.2% to 81 yen. The yen was little changed at 108.14 per euro. That was our economic bulletin for today. Thank you for watching and goodbye.